What's up, everybody? Welcome to Scientists That Destroy Evolution Theory. This is episode 3, and we're looking at an article by Dr. David Menton, who has a PhD in biology. The Bible teaches that humans were created with the whole planet and the universe less than 7,000 years ago, approximately 6,200 years, give or take 100 or 200 years. But evolution teaches, if you think that sounds bizarre or crazy, and unscientific, we'll just look at what evolution theory teaches, which is that all of the animals came from a rock, which came from a little tiny dot that exploded out of nothing and produced everything. So what makes more sense, God creating man from the dirt, or dirt resurrecting itself into a living cell? Just comparing those two, it's pretty easy to make the rational decision unless you've been educated to believe that you share a common heritage with an earthworm. You just have to go to school for many years to be taught to believe something that dumb. You could not do it on your own. So let's look at this article by Dr. David Menton. The Human Tail and Other Tales of Evolution. All true tails have bones in them that are posterior extension of the vertebral column. Also, all true tails have muscles associated with their vertebrae, which permit some movement of the tail. Ledley conceded that there has never been a single documented case of an animal lacking these distinctive features, nor has there been a single case of a human caudal appendage having any of these features. In fact, the caudal appendage Ledley described is merely a fatty outgrowth of skin that was located in the right place on the back to be a tail. Still, Ledley saw his caudal appendage as providing compelling proof for the evolution of man from our monkey-like ancestors. He said that even those of us who are familiar with the literature that defined our place in Darwinism are rarely confronted with the relation between human beings and their primitive ancestors on a daily basis. The caudal appendage brings this reality to the force and makes it tangible and inescapable. So according to this guy, when you see like the fatty outgrowth of tissue that's on the tailbone, it's like some babies are born with this, where it's excessively like just fatty growth, fat tissue growing around that area excessively, so where it forms like a tail, but it's not a tail because it doesn't have the characteristics of a tail. It doesn't have the right mechanics set up there. It's just fatty tissue. But according to this crazed individual, he thinks that it's a tail and that's evidence that we used to have tails all the time. But let's continue with the article. Is there any branch of science other than evolution where such trivial data can be extrapolated into such profound and inescapable facts? As here in the highlighted area, as recently as 1971, the Encyclopedia Britannica claimed that there was more than 100 vestigial organs in man. Vestigial means basically not necessary or useless, but the human tail is just one example of what evolutionists call a vestigial organ. As the name suggests, these organs are supposed to represent useless remnants of what were once functional and useful organs in our primitive ancestors. As recently as 1971, the Encyclopedia Britannica claimed that there were more than 100 vestigial organs in man. Even critically important organs such as the thymus, parathyroid glands were once considered to be vestigial simply because their functions were not understood. As biomedical science has progressed, there are fewer and fewer claims of functionless organs. Despite their diminishing numbers, vestigial organs are still mentioned in textbooks as one of the strongest evidence for evolution and against intelligent design by a creator. The most frequently cited example of vestigial organs in man are the coccyx and appendix. The human coccyx or tailbone is a group of 4 or 5 small vertebrae fused into one bone at the lower end of our vertebral column. Most of us never really think about our tailbone until we fall on it. Evolutionists are dead certain that it's a vestige of a tail left over from our monkey-like ancestors. Coccyx does occupy the same relative position at the end of our vertebral column as does the tail in tailed primates, but then where else would it be? The vertebral column is a linear row of bones to support the head at its beginning and must end somewhere. Wherever it ends, evolutionists will be sure to call it a vestigial tail. Most modern biology textbooks give the earnest impression that the human coccyx has no real function other than to remind us of the inescapable fact of evolution. In fact, the coccyx has some very important functions. Several muscles converge from the ring-like arrangement of the pelvic bones to anchor on the coccyx, forming a bowl-shaped muscular floor of the pelvis called the pelvic diaphragm. The incurved coccyx with its attached pelvic diaphragm keeps the many organs in our abdominal cavity from literally falling through between our legs. Some of the pelvic diaphragm muscles are also important in controlling the elimination of waste from our body through the rectum. Another common evolutionary claim found in textbooks is that the human appendix is really a vestigial cecum left over from our plant-eating evolutionary ancestors. So what he just described there is some very valuable functions. The tailbone is an anchor point to several muscles, and it's useful for controlling or harnessing our our insides. And so you probably have trouble using the bathroom if you had it removed. Definitely, like standing up, sitting down is going to present more problems. I mean, there's probably all sorts of problems if you just remove the tail. What if you don't need it, just like an appendix, or you just remove it for no reason, just get it over with before it causes you any problems. But the tailbone isn't known to, we'll talk about the appendix in a minute, but the tailbone is not known to get in the way, really. It's just like if you break it, then sometimes it has to be removed. But breaking it, is a horrible experience. It's a valuable part, and it has to end somewhere. You would expect that we'd have, like an ending to that vertebral column of our spine. It starts at the head and it goes down, so it's going to end there, and there's no need for us to have a tail. So, there's like a nub formed, and sometimes that nub turns into like excessively, you know, excessive growth of fatty tissue, which look like tails in young kids and stuff, and they just have it cut off, and it's no problem. It's not a tail at all. We didn't come from monkeys, okay? Our tailbone didn't come from an ape just because it looks like it may have, you know. And even if it was, this is a reduction of information. It's like we lost the tail. It would be, profitable for us today. So I don't know why we would lose a tail. I mean, you could have basically another arm if you had a tail. So that would be an example of losing. In evolution, you really require a gain in information. But we'll move on to the next part of the article. So the appendix, a vestigial cecum left over from our plant-eating evolutionary ancestors. The cecum is a blind ending pouch near the beginning of the large intestine, which provides additional space for digestion. In some plant-eating animals, such as cows, cecum contains special bacteria that aid in the digestion of cellulose. The appendix is clearly not a vestigial cecum because almost every mammal has a cecum, and many of these also have an appendix. Man, for example, has both a cecum and an appendix. Neither is vestigial or useless. The appendix, like the one vestigial tonsils and adenoids, is a lymphoid organ, part of the body's immune system that makes antibodies against infections in the digestive system. Believing it to be a useless evolutionary leftover, many surgeons once removed even the healthy appendix whenever they were in the abdominal cavity. Today, removal of a healthy appendix under most circumstances would be considered medical malpractice. So you do need the appendix that does play functional role in the digestive system and partially the immune system. And so removing it, you'd be more susceptible to, diseases. And so it, some would say that it's totally useless. Like you don't need it at all. You're definitely not going to die if you remove it, but there could be a slightly more of a chance of you being susceptible to other diseases too, because it does have, a functional role. In this highlighted region, it says the presence of rudimentary organs in the adult do not tell us something about evolution, but rather tell us something about embryology. So there are organs in the body that have no known function in the adult, but are still not vestigial in the evolutionary sense. For example, poorly developed and inactive mammary glands are found in adult males of all mammals, including man. Even evolutionists do not believe that these rudimentary glands are vestigial mammary glands left over from the female ancestors of males, nor do they believe that males once nurse their young. There is a much better explanation for the male mammary gland. Males and females develop from nearly identical embryos, which at an early stage of development become either male or female under the influence of genes in the sex chromosomes. The same parts of an embryo may produce either male or female sex organs and mammary glands. In humans, almost every component of female sex organs can be found in a rudimentary form in the male, and the reverse is also true. Thus, the presence of rudimentary organs in the adult do not tell us something about evolution, but rather tell us something about embryology. In conclusion, the vestigial status of many organs have often been merely a way of covering up our ignorance of their true function. Unfortunately, there is little inclination to investigate the functional significance of organs believed to be useless. There are now few, if any, organs that are considered to be functionless in both embryo and adult. Even if vestigial organs were to exist, they would not provide evidence for evolution, but rather devolution. They're devolving. The problem for evolutionists is not how useful organs are lost, but how evolution produces new useful organs with all their integrated complexity. It is here that we find evolutionary tales. So, there are other vestigial organs, that they would consider to be useless. So, like the mammary glands, that you can get enough estrogen, I guess, in your body and then be able to produce some kind of a milk from the male nipple, but that's not useless. Just we inherited that from the developmental process, and it's not useful. But in an emergency situation, I suppose you could do it. Um, the vestigial structures, there's so the appendixes, of course, it's like if you don't need something necessarily to live, that that doesn't mean that you don't need it at all. You can remove your arms and your legs and you could still live. I guess you'd need somebody to take care of you, but uh, you could live. So that doesn't mean that you don't need your arms and your legs, though. So that's and like he was saying, there's a devolution process. You need an advance in the structure, not just like the tail reducing to a tailbone. Or, I mean, I don't know what their idea of the appendix is, but let's see. I don't believe that vestigial organs are um, devolved um, devolved structures that previously were advanced. What is the correct analysis of a vestigial structure? One that appears to have, little to no functions, such as these examples that were given in the article. The I think the rational and most logical reason for them is that they were once more useful in the past and are now less useful. So it's not that they were like something else entirely. It wasn't like a completely different structure that then devolved into what it is today. The human tailbone has always been there. It may have had a better function in the past than it does today, though, just like the appendix. And that's more rational to think that, it's evidence that we like design. So if we're losing structures, and then at the same time, like in the evolution of a whale, for instance, you go from a four-legged animal to a whale, the reduction of those legs with the hooves, or the digits or whatever it is, it's going to have to reduce itself into a fin, perfectly good fin, 100% adapt to the water. And that all has to happen by random chance. Nature, of course, is driving the four-legged animals to extinction. And so the only ones that will be able to survive are the ones that, randomly mutate into animals that adapt to live in the water. So that process is a random process of nature causing the animals to go extinct. But the totally blind, random chance is in the genetic morphing of these creatures, which today there are obvious limits, and there's no reason to believe that that would change. No experiment has showed otherwise. You can't mutate something into something else. You can't cause a major change in the genes and the DNA and the structure of an animal. It's never been done. So thank you so much for tuning in, and stay in prayer. God bless America. My name is Christopher Sylvius. Peace be upon you. I'm out.